desperate billionaire risks everything, masquerades as destitute vagrant in scandalous attempt to uncover true love at glamorous beauty pageant. You won't believe what happens next. The buzzing excitement of Rio de Janeiro's streets seemed to converge on one particular location, a grand television studio that stood proudly against the vibrant cityscape. A line of stunningly beautiful women, each more captivating than the last, stretched along the sidewalk, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Their elaborate makeup and extravagant outfits hinted at something extraordinary about to unfold. As the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the city, 27 women from every corner of Brazil made their way into the imposing building. The click-clack of their high heels echoed through the entrance, a symphony of anticipation and nerves. Each of these women represented a different state, bringing with them not just their physical beauty, but also the rich cultural tapestry of their regions. Little did these contestants know that they were about to become part of something far more intricate than a simple beauty pageant. Behind the scenes, a plan was unfolding, one that would test not just their outer beauty, but the very essence of their character. But Daniel, the youngest son of the television network's owner, watched from a hidden vantage point as the women filed in. At 35, he was handsome, successful, and by all accounts, one of Brazil's most eligible bachelors. Yet, a deep-seated dissatisfaction gnawed at him. Years of failed relationships and countless encounters with women more interested in his wallet than his heart had left him jaded and searching for something more. As he observed the contestants, Daniel's mind wandered to the unconventional plan he had concocted. He was tired of the superficiality that surrounded him, the constant parade of beautiful faces that seemed to mask empty souls. This pageant, he had decided, would be different. It would be his chance to find a wife who valued more than just his family's wealth and status. Amidst the chaos of the arriving contestants, a different figure caught Daniel's eye. Beatriz, the pageant's assistant producer, darted between the glamorous women, clipboard in hand, her wild hair and rumpled clothes a stark contrast to the polished beauty that surrounded her. There was something about her frantic energy and genuine smile that intrigued Daniel, though he quickly pushed the thought aside. After all, he was here for a specific purpose. As the studio doors closed behind the last contestant, the air crackled with excitement and tension. The pageant was about to begin, but for Daniel it was more than just a competition. It was the start of a journey that would challenge his perceptions, test his values, and potentially change the course of his life forever. Little did anyone know, not the contestants, not Beatriz, not even Daniel himself, that the events about to unfold would shake the foundations of their world, forcing them to question everything they thought they knew about beauty, love, and the true value of a person's character. Daniel stood before the mirror in his luxurious penthouse, studying his reflection with a critical eye. The face that stared back at him was one that graced magazine covers and sparked gossip in high society circles, yet it felt like a mask one he was about to shed in the most dramatic way possible. As he began to apply the makeup that would transform him into a homeless man, Daniel's mind wandered to the events that had led him to this point. Growing up as the son of one of Brazil's media moguls, he had never wanted for anything material. But love? True, genuine love. That had always seemed just out of reach. He remembered his first serious girlfriend, Mariana. They had met at a charity gala, her beauty outshined only by her apparent passion for environmental causes. For months, Daniel had been smitten, showering her with gifts and whisking her away on exotic vacations. It wasn't until he overheard her bragging to a friend about how she had landed the golden goose that his world came crashing down. Then there was Luisa, the aspiring actress who had seemed so genuine, so down to earth. Daniel had even considered proposing, until he discovered her carefully curated poor girl persona was just that, a persona designed to appeal to his known desire for authenticity. With each failed relationship, the pressure from his family intensified. His father, a self-made man who had built his media empire from nothing, couldn't understand Daniel's reluctance to settle down. "You have the world at your feet, son," he would say, his voice a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "Any woman would be lucky to have you." But that was precisely the problem. Daniel didn't want just any woman. He wanted someone who would love him for who he was, not for his family name or his bank account. His older siblings had all married within their social circle, their unions more mergers than marriages. Daniel had watched as their initial excitement faded into polite indifference, their homes becoming more like business arrangements than loving households. He had vowed that would never be his fate. As he applied the final touches to his disguise, Daniel couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. Here he was, a man who could buy anything he wanted, about to pretend to have nothing. The ragged clothes felt foreign against his skin, a far cry from the tailored suits he was accustomed to. He thought about the contestants he had glimpsed earlier. They were undoubtedly beautiful, each one carefully selected to represent the diverse beauty of Brazil. But would any of them see past the surface? Would any of them show kindness to a man they believed had nothing to offer? Daniel took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He knew his plan was risky, perhaps even a little cruel, but he was desperate to find someone real, someone who could see the man behind the money. As he stepped out of his penthouse, the cool night air hit his face. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he taking this too far? But then he remembered the hollow feeling that had been his constant companion, the loneliness that no amount of wealth could fill. No, he decided. This was his chance to find something genuine in a world that often felt fake. With one last look at the glittering city below, Daniel stepped into the shadows, ready to begin his unconventional search for love. Little did he know that his journey would lead him not just to question others, but to confront truths about himself he had long ignored. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the most unexpected love story was about to unfold in the heart of Rio de Janeiro. The grand television studio buzzed with an electric energy as the beauty pageant contestants arrived. The air was thick with the scent of hairspray and perfume, mingling with the palpable excitement and nervous tension. Each of the 27 women, representing the diverse beauty of Brazil's states, entered with a mix of confidence and apprehension. Beatriz, the production assistant, stood at the entrance, clipboard in hand, her wild hair barely contained in a messy bun. She greeted each contestant with a warm smile, though her eyes betrayed the stress of coordinating such a high-profile event. "Welcome, ladies," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Please follow me to the dressing rooms." As the women filed past, Beatriz couldn't help but feel a twinge of insecurity. In her rumpled clothes and minimal makeup, she felt plain in comparison to the glamorous contestants. Yet she pushed these thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. Among the contestants, a few stood out immediately. Gabriela, representing Sao Paulo, exuded a quiet confidence. Her natural beauty was enhanced by a kind smile that she offered to everyone, from her fellow contestants to the harried staff members. Lai, from Bahia, brought with her the vibrant energy of Salvador, her laughter infectious as she chatted with the other women. Then there was Fernanda, the representative from Rio de Janeiro. Her striking features and perfectly coiffed hair marked her as an early favorite, but there was a sharpness to her gaze that made Beatriz uneasy. As Fernanda passed by, she wrinkled her nose at Beatriz's appearance. "Darling," she drawled, "you might want to consider entering next year. Clearly, you could use some beauty tips." Beatriz felt her cheeks flush, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Thank you for your concern, Ms. Fernanda, but I'm quite happy behind the scenes." As the contestants settled into their dressing rooms, the backstage area became a flurry of activity. Makeup artists and hairstylists rushed about, transforming already beautiful women into visions of perfection. The air was filled with a cacophony of hair dryers, excited chatter, and the occasional nervous laugh. Carlos, the show's director, strode through the chaos like a general surveying his troops. His face, pulled tight from countless cosmetic procedures, barely moved as he barked orders at the staff. When he reached Beatriz, his eyes narrowed. "Everything better be perfect, understand? This show could make or break careers, including yours." But Beatriz nodded, swallowing hard. She knew the stakes were high, not just for the contestants, but for everyone involved. As she hurried to check on the lighting for the opening number, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to be one of those women admired, pampered, with the world at their feet. Little did she know that among the glitz and glamour, a different drama was about to unfold. Outside the studio, a figure in tattered clothes approached, his eyes scanning the building with a mix of determination and apprehension. Daniel, now unrecognizable in his disguise, was about to set his plan in motion. As the final preparations were made and the contestants took their places for the opening number, there was a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, and the pageant began, but for some, the real show was just beginning. In the shadows of the glittering stage, destinies were about to intertwine in ways no one could have predicted. The beauty pageant was more than just a competition for a crown. It was about to become a stage for love, deception, and self-discovery. As the sun began to set over Rio de Janeiro, casting long shadows across the bustling streets, Daniel made his way towards the television studio. His heart raced beneath the tattered clothes that now adorned his usually impeccable frame. The transformation was startling. His designer stubble had grown into a scruffy beard, his hair was disheveled, and dirt was smudged strategically across his face and hands. Approaching the studio, Daniel took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, but now that it was here, doubt began to creep in. Was this really the right way to find love? But it was too late for second thoughts now. He positioned himself near the entrance, careful to maintain a respectful distance that wouldn't alarm security. As the contestants began to arrive, Daniel observed their reactions. Some walked past without a second glance, their eyes fixed firmly ahead. Others wrinkled their noses in disgust, quickening their pace to avoid any interaction. Then came Fernanda, her beauty as striking as her demeanor was cold. As she approached, Daniel mustered his courage and spoke, his voice deliberately rough and pleading. "Excuse me, miss, could you spare some change for food?" Fernanda's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in contempt. "Get away from me, you filthy beggar," she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "How dare you speak to me? Go find a job if you want to eat." Daniel flinched at her harsh words, but inside he felt a mix of disappointment and validation. This was exactly the kind of reaction he had feared from the women he usually encountered in his social circle. As he retreated, nursing his wounded pride, he noticed another contestant approaching. It was Gabriella, her warm smile a stark contrast to Fernanda's icy glare. Daniel repeated his plea, bracing himself for another rejection. To his surprise, Gabriella paused. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice gentle. "I don't have any cash on me," but here she reached into her bag and pulled out a sandwich. "I was saving this for later, but you need it more than I do." Daniel was stunned by her kindness. As he accepted the sandwich with trembling hands, their eyes met briefly. For a moment he forgot about his disguise, lost in the genuine compassion he saw in her gaze. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're very kind." Gabriella smiled again. "Everyone deserves kindness," she replied. "I hope things get better for you soon." As she walked away, Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps his plan wasn't so foolish after all. But his momentary elation was short-lived as he overheard a snippet of conversation between two other contestants. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "Gabriella's already playing the saint. Bet she planned that whole thing for the cameras." "Obviously," the other replied with a sneer, as if anyone would actually touch a filthy homeless person unless they had something to gain. Their words stung, reminding Daniel of the cynicism that had driven him to this extreme measure in the first place. He wondered if there was any genuineness left in this world of beauty and ambition. As the day wore on, Daniel continued his observations. Some contestants ignored him completely, while others offered small kindnesses, a smile, a word of encouragement, or in rare cases, some spare change. But none had quite the impact of Gabriella's simple act of sharing her food. Just as he was considering calling it a day, a harried-looking woman rushed past him, her arms full of clipboards and her hair a wild mess. She tripped on an uneven paving stone, sending her papers flying. Without thinking, Daniel rushed to help her. "Oh, thank you," she said, gratefully accepting the papers he handed her. It was only when their eyes met that Daniel recognized her. It was Beatrice, the production assistant he had noticed earlier. For a moment he forgot his disguise, struck by the genuine warmth in her eyes despite her obvious stress. But then she was gone, hurrying into the studio with a final word of thanks. As night fell and the streets emptied, Daniel made his way back to his penthouse, his mind whirling with the day's events. He had seen kindness and cruelty, genuine compassion and calculated performance. But most of all, he had seen humanity in all its complex, contradictory glory. Removing his disguise, Daniel stared at his reflection in the mirror. The man who looked back at him seemed different, somehow humbled, perhaps, by the experiences of the day. As he prepared for bed, he couldn't shake the memory of Gabriella's kindness, or the unexpected warmth he had felt in his brief encounter with Beatrice. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges and revelations, but for now he allowed himself a small smile. His unconventional plan was working. He was seeing these women for who they truly were. What he hadn't anticipated was how much he would learn about himself in the process. Beatrice hurried through the crowded streets of Rio, her mind racing as fast as her feet. The early morning sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the awakening city. She clutched her worn leather satchel close, filled with notes and ideas for her dream project, a documentary about the hidden lives of urban animals. As she approached the television studio, Beatrice allowed herself a moment of wistful thinking. This wasn't where she had imagined herself when she graduated from journalism school with honors. Her dreams had been big investigative reporting, hard-hitting documentaries, stories that could change the world. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The memory of her father's illness still weighed heavily on her. The mounting medical bills, the stress etched on her mother's face, the helplessness she felt as she watched her once strong father waste away. It was during those dark days that Beatrice made the difficult decision to put her dreams on hold. The job at the television studio wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to help support her family through the crisis. Now, years later, she found herself still there, running errands and managing the chaos of reality TV shows and beauty pageants. It wasn't the career she had envisioned, but Beatrice was nothing if not adaptable. She had learned to find small joys in her work, to see the humanity in even the most superficial of productions. As she entered the studio, the familiar buzz of activity enveloped her. Makeup artists bustled about, lighting technicians adjusted their rigs, and the contestants for the beauty pageant were already arriving, each more stunning than the last. Beatrice's voice called out. She turned to see her brother, Cesar, waving from the security desk. His broad smile was a welcome sight in the midst of the morning chaos. "Cesar, what are you doing here?" she asked, genuinely surprised to see him. He held up a paper bag. "You forgot your lunch." Again, his tone was gently teasing, but his eyes held a hint of concern. "You need to take better care of yourself, sis." Beatrice felt a rush of affection for her older brother. Even with his own struggles, the long hours at the factory, the constant worry about job security, he always found time to look out for her. "Thanks, Cesar," she said, taking the bag. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Starve, probably," he joked. Then his expression turned serious. "How's the documentary coming along?" Beatrice sighed, slowly. "But I'm not giving up. I managed to get some great footage of a family of stray cats near our apartment last night." Cesar nodded approvingly. "That's my sister, always chasing her dreams, even if it's just one stray cat at a time." But as they chatted, Beatrice couldn't help but notice the curious glances from the arriving contestants. She knew what they saw: a plain, somewhat disheveled woman in conversation with a working-class man. In their world of glamour and beauty, Beatrice and Cesar were practically invisible. But Beatrice didn't mind. She knew the value of her relationship with her brother, the strength they drew from each other. It was worth more than any tiara or modeling contract. As Cesar prepared to leave for his shift at the factory, he gave Beatrice a quick hug. "Don't let this place make you forget who you are," he whispered. "You're meant for more than just managing other people's dreams." With those words echoing in her mind, Beatrice squared her shoulders and turned to face the day ahead. The contestants were gathering, the director was shouting orders, and somewhere in the midst of all this chaos, she had a job to do. As she moved through the crowd, clipboard in hand, Beatrice allowed herself one last thought of her documentary dreams. Then, with a small smile, she pushed it aside. There would be time for that later. For now, she had a beauty pageant to run, and she was determined to do it with all the grace and professionalism she could muster. Little did she know that this day would bring an encounter that would change the course of her life, challenging her perceptions and reigniting dreams she thought long forgotten. The afternoon sun blazed down on the park adjacent to the television studio, where Beatrice was overseeing an outdoor segment for the beauty pageant. Contestants milled about, their perfect makeup at odds with the natural setting. Beatrice wiped sweat from her brow, her wild hair even more unruly in the humidity. As she was directing a group of contestants to their positions, a commotion near the park's entrance caught her attention. A disheveled man in tattered clothes was approaching, causing some of the women to recoil in disgust. Beatrice's heart sank. She'd seen this before: homeless individuals drawn to the glamour and excitement of television productions. Usually, security would usher them away, but today she decided to handle it herself. As she approached the man, she was struck by something in his eyes. Despite his ragged appearance, there was an intensity, an intelligence that seemed at odds with his circumstances. "Excuse me, Sir," Beatrice said gently. "I'm afraid you can't be here. This is a closed set." The man, Daniel, in his disguise, looked at her with a mixture of desperation and hope that tugged at Beatrice's heartstrings. "Please," he said, his voice rough but articulate, "I'm just looking for some food. I haven't eaten in days." Beatrice hesitated. She knew she should send him away, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of her father's illness, of how quickly life could change. Or maybe it was just basic human compassion. "Wait here," she said softly, then turned to her bag. She pulled out the lunch Caesar had brought her earlier. "It's not much, but please take it." Daniel was stunned. He had approached Beatrice as part of his plan, expecting to be dismissed like he had been by so many others, but her kindness, offered so freely and without expectation, caught him off guard. "Thank you," he murmured, genuinely moved. "You're very kind." Beatrice smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed her face. For a moment, Daniel forgot his disguise, forgot the beautiful contestants nearby. All he could see was the compassion in Beatrice's eyes. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said, echoing Gabriella's words from earlier. "I'm Beatrice, by the way." "Daniel," he replied automatically, then caught himself. "I mean, that was my name, before." Beatrice nodded, not pressing for details. Instead, she gestured to a nearby bench. "Why don't you sit here and eat? Just try not to disturb the shooting, okay?" Daniel nodded gratefully and settled onto the bench. As he ate, he watched Beatrice return to her work, efficiently managing the chaos of the production. He was impressed by her calm demeanor, the way she handled both the demanding contestants and the stressed crew with equal patience. As the afternoon wore on, Daniel found himself paying less attention to the contestants and more to Beatrice. He overheard snippets of conversation, her passion for documentaries, her dreams of telling meaningful stories. He saw how she treated everyone, from the star contestants to the lowest-ranking crew members, with the same respect and kindness. When a light suddenly malfunctioned, sending a contestant into a panic about her appearance, it was Beatrice who calmed her down with a mix of humor and pragmatism. "Trust me," she said with a self-deprecating laugh, gesturing to her own wild hair. "If I can make it through life looking like this, you'll be just fine with a slightly dimmer light." The contestant laughed despite herself, tension dissipating. Daniel found himself chuckling too, drawn in by Beatrice's unpretentious charm. As the sun began to set and the shoot wrapped up, Beatrice approached Daniel again. "We're finishing up now," she said gently. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to leave." Daniel nodded, standing up slowly. "Thank you again," he said, meaning it more than she could know. "Your kindness, it means more than you realize." Beatrice smiled that warm smile again. "Take care of yourself, Daniel," she said. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added, "If you need help, there's a shelter 2 blocks east of here. Tell them Beatrice sent you. They're good people." As Daniel walked away, his mind was whirling. This wasn't how he had expected the day to go. He had come to judge the contestants, to find a beautiful wife who could see past appearances. Instead, he found himself captivated by a woman who embodied the very qualities he sought: kindness, authenticity, and a beauty that radiated from within. For the first time since hatching his plan, Daniel felt a twinge of guilt. Beatrice had opened her heart to him, thinking he was truly in need. How would she react when she discovered the truth? As he made his way back to his penthouse, Daniel realized his plan had backfired in the most unexpected way. He had come looking for a beauty queen, but instead he might have found something far more precious: a glimpse of real, unvarnished humanity in the most unlikely of places. Little did he know, This encounter would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, beauty, and the true worth of a person. The following day, the television studio was a hive of activity. Contestants bustled about, their faces masks of determination and nerves. The air was thick with hairspray and perfume, mingling with the palpable tension of competition. Beatrice arrived early, her mind still lingering on the encounter with the homeless man from yesterday. She shook off the thoughts, focusing on the tasks at hand. Today was crucial preliminary interviews, and the swimsuit competition was scheduled. As she entered the main stage area, she was immediately accosted by Fernanda, last year's runner-up and a favorite to win this year. "You," Fernanda snapped, her perfectly manicured finger pointing accusingly at Beatrice. "My dressing room is a disaster. The lighting is all wrong, and don't even get me started on the temperature. Do you know what humidity does to my hair?" Beatrice took a deep breath, counting to 10 in her head. "I'll look into it right away, Ms. Fernanda," she said, keeping her voice level. "See that you do," Fernanda huffed. "And for heaven's sake, do something about your own appearance. You're bringing down the entire production with that mess you call hair." As Fernanda strutted away, Beatrice felt a familiar pang of insecurity. She pushed it aside, reminding herself of Caesar's words. She was more than just her appearance. Across the room, Gabriella approached, her warm smile a stark contrast to Fernanda's cold demeanor. "Don't listen to her," Gabriella said softly. "You're doing an amazing job keeping everything running smoothly." Beatrice smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Gabriella. That means a lot." As the day progressed, the rivalry between contestants became more apparent. Beatrice overheard whispered accusations of sabotage, a mysteriously torn dress here, accidentally spilled coffee there. She did her best to mediate, but the tension was palpable. During a brief lull, Beatrice ducked into a quiet corner, pulling out her notebook. She jotted down ideas for her documentary, finding solace in her passion project. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice Carlos, the show's director, approaching until his shadow fell over her. "What's this?" he demanded, snatching the notebook from her hands. "Planning your great escape from us, are you?" Beatrice flushed, reaching for her notebook. "It's nothing, just some personal notes." Carlos skimmed the pages, his lip curling. "Urban animals? Poverty in Rio? This is depressing nonsense." He tossed the notebook back to her. "Focus on your job, Beatrice. This show is your future, not some pipe-peep documentary." As Carlos walked away, Beatrice clutched her notebook to her chest, fighting back tears. She was so lost in her thoughts that she almost collided with a man entering the studio. "I'm so sorry," she began, then froze. It was the homeless man from yesterday, Daniel in disguise. You can't be here," she said, her voice a mixture of concern and confusion. Daniel, caught off guard by the unexpected encounter, fumbled for words. I was looking for you," he said, thinking quickly. "I wanted to thank you again for your kindness yesterday." Beatrice's expression softened. "That's very thoughtful of you, but it's really not safe for you to be here. If security finds you..." Her words were cut short by a shriek from across the room. Fernanda had spotted Daniel and was backing away in horror. "Security," she yelled. "There's a filthy vagrant in here." Chaos erupted. Contestants scattered, security guards appeared from all directions, and Carlos came storming over, his face purple with rage. In the midst of the pandemonium, Beatrice made a split-second decision. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him into a nearby storage closet, closing the door behind them. In the dim light, they stood face to face, closer than they had ever been. Beatrice could see the intelligence in Daniel's eyes, so at odds with his appearance. For his part, Daniel was struck by the quiet strength in Beatrice's gaze, the compassion that seemed to radiate from her. "Why did you help me?" Daniel whispered, genuinely curious. Beatrice shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Everyone deserves kindness, remember? Now wait here until things calm down. I'll find a way to get you out safely." As she slipped out of the closet, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Beatrice's unquestioning kindness, her willingness to risk her job to help a stranger, touched him deeply. For the first time, he began to question the wisdom of his plan. Outside, Beatrice faced the chaos she had left behind. As she worked to calm the contestants and reassure the director, her mind kept drifting back to the man in the closet. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Little did she know, this encounter would be the catalyst for events that would change both their lives forever. As the days passed, Daniel found himself increasingly conflicted. His initial plan to find a wife among the beauty contestants seemed hollow now, overshadowed by his growing fascination with Beatrice. He continued his charade, appearing at the studio and nearby locations as the homeless man, but his focus had shifted. One afternoon, as he lingered near the studio's side entrance, he overheard a heated conversation between two contestants, Fernanda and another woman he didn't recognize. "Listen," Fernanda hissed, her voice low but intense. "We need to take Gabriella out of the running. She's too much of a threat." The other contestant looked nervous. "But how? She's genuinely talented and kind. The judges love her." Fernanda's laugh was cold. "Kindness doesn't win crowns, darling. I have a plan. There's a charity event tomorrow. We'll make sure Gabriella doesn't make it there. A no-show will devastate her chances." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen Gabriella's genuine kindness firsthand. The idea of her being sabotaged made him sick. As he pondered what to do with this information, he spotted Beatrice exiting the studio, looking exhausted. Without thinking, he approached her. "Beatrice," he called softly, still in character as the homeless man. She turned, surprise and then warmth flooding her features. "Daniel, what are you doing here? It's not safe for you to keep coming back." He nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for his deception. "I know, I overheard something bad." Beatrice's brow furrowed with concern. "What do you mean?" Daniel hesitated, then recounted what he'd heard about the plot against Gabriella. As he spoke, he watched Beatrice's expression change from concern to determination. "Thank you for telling me this," she said firmly. "I'll make sure nothing happens to Gabriella." As she turned to go, Daniel caught her arm gently. "Beatrice, why do you care so much? About me? About Gabriella? About everyone?" She paused, considering her words carefully. "Because everyone deserves a chance." A fair shot at their dreams, her eyes met his, filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I know what it's like to have to put your dreams on hold, to feel invisible. I don't want anyone else to feel that way if I can help it." With that, she was gone, leaving Daniel standing there, more conflicted than ever. He had come into this plan thinking he knew what he wanted: a beautiful wife who could see past his wealth. But now, watching Beatrice's retreating form, he realized he might have been looking for the wrong things all along. Back in his penthouse, Daniel paced restlessly. He thought about Fernanda's cold ambition, Gabriella's genuine kindness, and Beatrice's unwavering compassion. He thought about the superficial world he'd grown up in, where appearances meant everything, and contrasted it with the authentic humanity he'd witnessed in his disguise. As night fell over Rio, Daniel came to a decision. He couldn't continue this charade. It wasn't fair to the contestants, it wasn't fair to Beatrice, and it wasn't fair to himself. He needed to come clean, to face the consequences of his actions. But as he steeled himself for the revelation to come, a part of him worried. How would Beatrice react when she learned the truth? Would she see it as an unforgivable deception, or would she understand his motives? And what about his own feelings? In trying to find a wife, had he accidentally stumbled upon something much more valuable: a genuine connection with someone who saw the world in a way that both challenged and inspired him? As he lay in bed that night, Daniel realized that his plan had backfired in the most unexpected way. He had set out to test others, but in the end it was his own values, his own perceptions of love and worth that were being put to the test. Tomorrow would bring the revelation, and with it, the potential for both heartbreak and redemption. As sleep finally claimed him, Daniel's last thoughts were of Beatrice, her kind eyes, her gentle smile, and the quiet strength that had captured his heart in a way no beauty queen ever could. The following morning, Beatrice arrived at the studio earlier than usual, her mind racing with the information Daniel had shared. She was determined to protect Gabriella from Fernanda's scheme, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Daniel than met the eye. As she organized her tasks for the day, her brother Cesar's voice echoed in her head. "Be careful, Beatrice," he had warned when she told him about the mysterious homeless man. "Something doesn't add up. Why would he keep coming back to the studio? Beatrice had defended Daniel, citing his gratitude and kind nature, but Caesar's words had planted a seed of doubt. Now, as she reviewed the contestant files, a nagging feeling persisted. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. She looked up to see Daniel, still in his homeless disguise, being confronted by security. Without thinking, she rushed over. "It's okay," she told the guards. "He's with me. I'll handle this." Once they were alone, Beatrice turned to Daniel, her eyes searching his face. "Why are you here again? I told you it's not safe." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a voice called out from behind them. "Beatrice! There you are. I need to talk to you about the charity event today." It was Carlos, the show's director. As Carlos approached, his eyes narrowed, focusing on Daniel. Beatrice saw a flicker of recognition pass over the director's face, quickly replaced by a calculating look. "Who's this?" Carlos asked, his tone suspiciously light. Beatrice began to explain, but Carlos cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Never mind. We have more important things to discuss. The limo for the charity event is running late. I need you to make sure all the girls are ready on time." As Carlos walked away, Beatrice couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She turned back to Daniel, only to find him looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Daniel," she said slowly, "what's really going on? Why do you keep coming back here?" Before he could answer, Beatrice's phone buzzed. It was a message from Caesar. "Found something. Check your email now." With a quick apology to Daniel, Beatrice pulled up her email. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. It was a photo from a society magazine showing the son of the network's owner at a gala event. A son who looked remarkably like the man standing in front of her, minus the dirt and ragged clothes. Beatrice's mind reeled. Could it be? Was Daniel, the homeless man she had befriended, actually Daniel Oliveira, the millionaire heir? She looked up from her phone, meeting Daniel's eyes. The guilt and apprehension she saw there confirmed her suspicions before he even spoke. "Beatrice," he began, his voice no longer rough but smooth and cultured, "I can explain." But Beatrice took a step back, hurt and confusion warring on her face. "You lied to me," she whispered. "All this time you were pretending." Daniel reached out to her, but she flinched away. "Please let me explain. It's not what you think." Beatrice shook her head, fighting back tears. "I trusted you." I thought she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Just then, Gabriella rushed up, oblivious to the tension between Beatrice and Daniel. "Beatrice, someone slashed the tires on the limo. We're going to be late for the charity event." The urgency in Gabriella's voice snapped Beatrice back to reality. She took a deep breath, pushing her feelings aside. There would be time to deal with Daniel's deception later. Right now, she had a job to do. "I'll handle it," she told Gabriella, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. She turned to Daniel, her eyes hard. "We're not finished here, but right now I have to go prevent a disaster." As Beatrice hurried away, Daniel was left standing alone, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. He had wanted to come clean on his own terms, but now the truth was out, and he might have lost the one person who had seen him for who he truly was, disguise or not. He watched as Beatrice efficiently organized alternative transportation for the contestants, her composure admirable despite the chaos around her and the emotional blow she had just received. In that moment, Daniel realized that his plan hadn't just backfired, it had revealed to him a truth he hadn't been looking for. In trying to find a wife who could see past his wealth, he had found someone who saw through to his very soul. And now, because of his deception, he might have lost her forever? As the contestants filed out, crisis averted thanks to Beatrice's quick thinking, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't undo what he had done, but he could try to make it right. It was time to reveal the truth to everyone. Consequences be damned. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, ready to face the music, and hoping against hope that it wasn't too late to salvage what he now realized was the most real connection he'd ever had. The grand finale of the beauty pageant had arrived, and the television studio was abuzz with excitement. Lights flashed, cameras rolled, and the air thrummed with nervous energy as the contestants made their final preparations. Beatrice moved through the chaos like a ship navigating stormy waters, her face a mask of professional calm that belied the turmoil within. The revelation of Daniel's true identity still stung, but she had a job to do. She couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with the show. As she helped Gabriella with a last-minute adjustment to her evening gown, Beatrice caught sight of Daniel entering the studio. He was no longer in his homeless disguise, but impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and privilege. Their eyes met across the room, and Beatrice quickly looked away, her heart racing. "Are you okay?" Gabriella asked, noticing Beatrice's distraction. Beatrice forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just pre-show jitters, I guess. You look beautiful, by the way. Go out there and shine." As Gabriella took her place with the other finalists, Beatrice retreated to the wings of the stage. She watched as Carlos, the director, strode to center stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming through the studio, "welcome to the grand finale of Miss Brazil. Tonight we crown not just a beauty queen, but an ambassador of grace, intelligence, and compassion." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Beatrice. She thought of Fernanda's scheme to sabotage Gabriella, of the petty rivalries she'd witnessed backstage. Was this really about grace and compassion, or just another game of surfaces and deception? As the competition progressed through its familiar rhythms, the evening gown parade, the talent showcase, the question and answer session, Beatrice found her mind wandering. She thought of her own dreams, pushed aside in pursuit of stability. She thought of Daniel and the genuine connection she'd felt with him when she believed he was homeless. Had it all been a lie? The final segment arrived, and Carlos took the stage once more. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a special surprise. Please welcome to the stage Daniel Oliveira, son of our network's esteemed owner. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as Daniel walked onto the stage. Beatrice saw confusion flash across the faces of the contestants who had encountered him as a homeless man. Daniel took the microphone, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Beatrice in the wings. "Good evening," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "I have a confession to make." The studio fell silent as Daniel recounted his deception, how he had disguised himself as a homeless man to test the character of the contestants, how he had been searching for authenticity in a world of artifice. "But in my misguided attempt to find truth," he continued, "I lost sight of it. I hurt people who showed me genuine kindness." His eyes found Beatrice again. "I betrayed the trust of someone who saw the best in me, even when I was at my supposed worst." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Beatrice stood frozen, torn between anger at his deception and a grudging admiration for his public admission. "This experience has taught me that true beauty, true worth isn't about appearance or status," Daniel said. "It's about kindness, compassion, and the ability to see the humanity in others, regardless of their circumstances." He paused, taking a deep breath. "That's why I've decided to change the terms of this competition. The winner will still receive the crown and the modeling contract, but they'll also receive a substantial donation in their name to a charity of their choice, dedicated to helping the homeless in our community." The announcement was met with applause, but Beatrice barely heard it. Her mind was reeling. Was this Daniel's way of making amends? Or just another grand gesture from a man used to buying his way out of problems? As the votes were tallied and the winner announced Gabriella, to Beatrice's quiet satisfaction, she slipped out of the studio, needing a moment to herself. She found a quiet corner in the parking lot, the sounds of celebration muffled in the distance. As she leaned against a wall, trying to sort through her tumultuous emotions, she heard footsteps approaching. "Beatrice," it was Daniel, his voice tentative. "Can we talk?" She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "I think you've said enough for one night, don't you?" He flinched at her tone but pressed on. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust. But please, let me explain." As Beatrice looked into his eyes, she saw genuine remorse there. Despite her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "All right," she said softly. "I'm listening." And there, in the quiet of the parking lot, with the sounds of the pageant fading in the background, Daniel and Beatrice began a conversation that would change both their lives forever. It was a conversation about truth and deception, about appearances and reality, about the masks we wear and the faces we show to the world. But most of all, it was a conversation about second chances, and the possibility of finding authentic connection in the most unexpected of places. In the days following the pageant, the media frenzy surrounding Daniel's revelation and Gabriella's win was intense. Newspapers and gossip columns buzzed with speculation about the unconventional contest and its dramatic conclusion. However, away from the public eye, a different drama was unfolding. Daniel sat in his expansive penthouse, staring out at the Rio skyline. The view that once filled him with a sense of pride now seemed empty. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from family, friends, and business associates, all demanding explanations for his behavior. He ignored them all, his mind focused on one person, Beatrice. But their conversation in the parking lot had been raw and honest. Beatrice had listened to his explanations, her face a mixture of hurt, confusion, and something else, a flicker of understanding that gave Daniel hope. "I need time," she had said finally. "This is a lot to process." Daniel respected her wish, but the silence was killing him. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over Beatrice's number before setting it down again with a sigh. Across the city, in a modest apartment, Beatrice was facing her own turmoil. She sat at her small desk, surrounded by scattered notes for her documentary project. But instead of working, she found herself replaying her interactions with Daniel over and over in her mind. Cesar watched his sister with concern. "You need to talk to him," he said gently. Beatrice looked up, startled. "What?" Daniel Cesar clarified. "I can see it's eating you up inside. You need closure, one way or another." Beatrice sighed. "It's not that simple, Cesar. He lied to me, to everyone." "Yes, he did," Cesar agreed. "But from what you've told me, he also showed you kindness and understanding when he had nothing to gain from it. That has to count for something." Beatrice mulled over her brother's words. It was true even in his disguise. Daniel had shown genuine concern for others. He had warned her about Fernanda's plot against Gabriella, risking exposure to help someone else. Meanwhile, Fernanda was dealing with the fallout of her own actions. Her attempt to sabotage Gabriella had backfired spectacularly, and now she found herself shunned by the other contestants and facing potential legal consequences. As she packed her bags, preparing to leave Rio in disgrace, Fernanda caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she saw beyond her perfect makeup and styled hair, and wondered if she had lost sight of something important along the way. Back at the television studio, life was slowly returning to normal. Carlos, the director, was already planning the next big show, but he found himself pausing as he passed by Beatrice's desk. "You know," he said, uncharacteristically gentle, "there's an opening in our documentary department, if you're interested." Beatrice looked up, surprised. "Really? But I thought." Carlos shrugged. "Let's just say recent events have made me reconsider a few things. Your passion project, it might have some merit after all." As Carlos walked away, Beatrice felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps some good could come out of this whole mess after all. That evening, as the sun set over Rio, Daniel found himself walking along the beach, lost in thought. He had come here often in his homeless disguise, finding a strange sort of peace among the ordinary people enjoying the sand and surf. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. He turned to see Beatrice standing there, looking both nervous and determined. "Beatrice," he breathed, hardly daring to hope. "You're here?" She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I think it's time we talked. Really talked." As they began to walk along the shore, the noise of the city faded away. Here, with the endless ocean before them and the stars beginning to twinkle overhead, they were just two people trying to find their way to understanding. "I'm still angry," Beatrice began, her voice soft but firm. "What you did, it wasn't right." Daniel nodded, accepting her words. "I know. I was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." But Beatrice continued, "I've been thinking about everything. About the man I met when you were in disguise. That man, he was real, wasn't he?" Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. "Yes," he said simply. "More real than I've ever been allowed to be." As they continued to talk, laying bare their fears, hopes, and insecurities, something shifted between them. The walls of pretense and expectation began to crumble, revealing two people who, despite their different backgrounds, shared a deep longing for authenticity and connection. As the night deepened around them, Daniel and Beatrice realized that this was just the beginning. They had a long way to go, trust to rebuild, and much to learn about each other. But for the first time, they both felt the stirring of something genuine, a connection built not on appearances or status, but on mutual understanding and respect. In the grand tapestry of Rio de Janeiro, where glitz and glamour often overshadowed the struggles of everyday life, an unlikely love story was taking root. It was a story that would challenge perceptions, break down barriers, and remind everyone involved that true beauty comes in many forms and often where you least expect to find it. As weeks turned into months, Daniel and Beatrice's relationship evolved, growing stronger with each passing day. They navigated the complexities of their different worlds, learning to bridge the gap between Daniel's life of privilege and Beatrice's more modest background. One sunny afternoon, they found themselves in a small cafe in a working-class neighborhood of Rio. It was a far cry from the upscale restaurants Daniel was accustomed to, but he found himself more at ease here than he ever had in those gilded establishments. "I have something to show you," Beatrice said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She pulled out her laptop and opened up a video file. "It's a rough cut of my documentary." Daniel leaned in, curious. On the screen, images of Rio's urban wildlife unfolded: stray dogs navigating busy streets, monkeys in city parks, even a family of capybaras by a polluted canal. But it wasn't just about animals. Interwoven were stories of the city's homeless population, their struggles and resilience paralleling those of the animals they often shared spaces with. As the video ended, Daniel sat back, moved. "Beatrice, this is incredible. It's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time." Beatrice beamed, but then her smile faltered. "The studio likes it, but they're hesitant about funding the full project. They think it's too controversial." Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "What if we funded it ourselves?" Beatrice looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we started our own production company? We could make documentaries that matter, tell stories that need to be told." The idea took root, growing and evolving as they discussed it. By the time they left the cafe, the foundations of a new venture were laid. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the beauty pageant continued to ripple through their lives. Gabriella, true to her nature, had used her platform to advocate for social causes, becoming a beloved figure in Brazil. She and Beatrice had formed a friendship, often collaborating on charitable projects. Fernanda, on the other hand, had faced a harsh reality check. After a period of self-reflection, she had reached out to Beatrice, asking for a chance to make amends. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Fernanda found herself volunteering at a homeless shelter, slowly learning to see beyond appearances. As for Daniel, his public confession had initially shocked his family and social circle, but as time passed, many came to respect his honesty and the changes he was making in his life. His father, initially furious, had gradually come to see the positive impact Daniel's actions had on their company's image and, more importantly, on Daniel himself. One evening, as Daniel and Beatrice walked along the same beach where they had their heart-to-heart months ago, Daniel suddenly stopped. "Beatrice," he said, taking her hands in his, "these past months have been the most real, the most meaningful of my life. You've shown me what truly matters." Beatrice looked at him, her heart racing. "Daniel." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small, simple ring, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry he would have chosen in the past. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to wear any masks. I just want to be myself with you for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Beatrice's eyes. This was not the fairy tale proposal she might have dreamed of as a young girl, but it was real, authentic, and perfect. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, I will." As they embraced, the sun setting behind them, they knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, merging their different worlds, building their new company, continuing to grow and learn together. But they faced the future with hope and determination, knowing that they had found something rare and precious, a love based on truth, understanding, and mutual respect. In the end, Daniel's misguided plan had led him to a truth he never expected to find. And Beatrice, who had always felt invisible in a world obsessed with surface beauty, had found someone who saw her true worth. Together, they were ready to write a new chapter not just in their own lives, but in the life of their city, using their unique perspectives to shed light on overlooked stories and bring about positive change. As they walked back along the beach, hand in hand, the lights of Rio twinkled in the distance. It was a reminder of where they had come from, and a beacon guiding them toward the future they would build together, a future founded on authenticity, compassion, and the beauty that comes from being true to oneself. As the sun rose over Rio de Janeiro, casting a golden glow across the city, Daniel and Beatriz stood hand in hand on the balcony of their new office. The sign on the door behind them read Autentico Produco's Authentic Productions. It had been a year since their engagement on the beach, and in that time they had poured their hearts and souls into bringing their shared vision to life. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had only strengthened their bond. "Can you believe it?" Beatriz said, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We're really doing this." Daniel squeezed her hand, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Believe it, meu amor. This is just the beginning." As they turned to enter their office, they were greeted by a small but passionate team, a mix of experienced professionals and young, idealistic newcomers. Among them was Cesar, Beatriz's brother, who had left his factory job to join their venture as a sound technician. "All right, everyone," Beatriz called out, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "Let's make some magic happen." Their first major project was an extension of Beatriz's original documentary. What had started as a simple exploration of urban wildlife had evolved into a powerful series examining the interconnectedness of social and environmental issues in Rio. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Daniel found himself marveling at the transformation in his life. Gone were the days of empty socialite parties and superficial connections. Here, surrounded by people driven by passion and purpose, he felt truly alive. Across town, in a community center in one of Rio's poorest neighborhoods, Gabriela was hosting a workshop for young girls. The beauty queen turned activist had become a beacon of hope for many, using her platform to advocate for education and empowerment. "Remember," she told the eager faces looking up at her, "true beauty comes from being kind, from helping others, from being the best version of yourself." As the girls nodded, hanging on her every word, Gabriela caught sight of a familiar face at the back of the room. It was Fernanda, quietly observing the session. After the workshop, Gabriela approached her former rival. "I'm glad you came," she said warmly. Fernanda nodded, a hint of her old confidence mixed with newfound humility. "I'm learning," she said simply. "Every day, I'm learning." Meanwhile, back at Autentico Produco's, Beatriz was reviewing footage with her team when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carlos, her former boss at the TV studio. "Your new show proposal? It's bold, risky, but we want it. Let's talk." Beatriz grinned, showing the message to Daniel. It was a validation of their vision, a sign that they were making waves in the industry. As evening fell, Daniel and Beatriz found themselves once again on the beach, where their journey together had truly begun. They walked barefoot along the shore, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. "You know," Daniel said, "when I came up with that ridiculous plan to find a wife, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Beatriz laughed, the sound carrying over the gentle crash of waves. "Life has a funny way of giving us what we need, not what we think we want." They stopped, turning to face each other. In the fading light, with the city glowing behind them and the vast ocean before them, they saw in each other's eyes the same passion, the same commitment to authenticity that had brought them together. "I love you," Daniel said softly, cupping Beatriz's face in his hands. "Not for what you look like, not for what you can do for me, but for who you are. For your kindness, your strength, your vision." Beatriz leaned into his touch, her heart full. "And I love you, Daniel. The real you, the one who cares deeply, who wants to make a difference. The you that you were always meant to be." As they sealed their words with a kiss, the stars began to twinkle overhead. In that moment, they were not a former socialite and a once overlooked assistant. They were simply Daniel and Beatriz, two souls who had found in each other the courage to be authentically themselves. The beauty pageant that had brought them together was now a distant memory, but its unexpected legacy lived on. In their love, in their work, and in the lives they touched, Daniel and Beatriz were redefining what it meant to be truly beautiful. As they walked back along the beach, their future stretched out before them like the endless horizon. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but they faced them together, hand in hand, hearts aligned. In each other they had found not just love, but a partner in their quest to reveal the authentic beauty in the world around them. And so, as the lights of Rio twinkled like 1,000 stars, Daniel and Beatriz continued their journey not to a fairy tale ending, but to a real-life adventure filled with purpose, passion, and the kind of love that transforms not just two lives, but ripples out to touch countless others. In the end, the greatest beauty they discovered was the beauty of being true to oneself and to each other. And that, they knew, was a beauty that would never fade. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Daniel and Beatriz stood on the stage of a packed auditorium. The audience, a diverse mix of people from all walks of life, waited with bated breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel began, his voice steady and clear, "welcome to the premiere of Belleza Real Beauty." Beatriz stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride and excitement. This series is more than just a documentary. It's a journey into the heart of what makes us human. The lights dimmed, and the opening sequence of their groundbreaking series filled the screen. It was the culmination of 2 years of hard work, a project that had taken them from the glittering high-rises of Rio to its humblest favelas, from pristine beaches to polluted waterways. As the first episode unfolded, the audience was transported into the lives of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. There was Maria, a former cleaner who had started a literacy program in her community. Joao, a young artist using street art to bring color and hope to forgotten neighborhoods. And Dona Celeste, an elderly woman who had turned her small backyard into an urban garden, feeding her neighbors and teaching children about nature. Interwoven with these human stories were breathtaking shots of Rio's urban wildlife, resilient creatures adapting to city life, a metaphor for the indomitable spirit of the city's inhabitants. In the back of the auditorium, Gabriela watched with tears in her eyes. She saw herself in these stories not the glamorous beauty queen she had once been, but the activist and mentor she had become. Beside her sat Fernanda, her face a study in reflection and growing understanding. As the credits rolled, the auditorium erupted in applause. Daniel and Beatriz stood hand in hand, overwhelmed by the response. This was more than just success, it was validation of their vision, their belief in the power of authentic storytelling. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Belleza Real became a national sensation, sparking conversations about beauty, worth, and the true meaning of success. Schools began incorporating episodes into their curriculum, and community organizations reached out for collaborations. One sunny afternoon, as Daniel and Beatriz were discussing plans for the next season, they received an unexpected visitor. It was Carlos, their former boss from the TV studio. "I owe you both an apology," he said, uncharacteristically humble. "I was wrong about what people want to see. You've changed the game." Beatriz smiled, remembering how far they'd all come. "It's never too late to see things differently, Carlos." As Carlos left, promising future collaborations, Daniel turned to Beatriz with a mischievous grin. "Speaking of seeing things differently, I have a surprise for you." He led her to the rooftop of their office building, where a small gathering of their closest friends and family waited. Caesar was there, beaming with pride. Gabriela and Fernanda stood side by side, their former rivalry replaced by a budding friendship. In the center stood a simple arch, decorated with wildflowers. "Beatriz," Daniel said, taking her hands in his, "we've been so busy changing the world, we almost forgot about our own happily ever after. Will you marry me? Right here, right now?" Beatriz laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Daniel Oliveira, you impossible man. Of course I will." As the impromptu ceremony began, with Cesar officiating and their friends bearing witness, Beatriz and Daniel exchanged vows that spoke not of fairy tale romance, but of partnership, respect, and a shared vision for a better world. "I promise to always see the real you," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, "and to help you see the beauty in yourself that I see every day." "And I promise," Beatriz replied, squeezing his hands, "to always remind you of the goodness in your heart, and to be your partner in all our adventures, big and small." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Cheers erupted from their small but jubilant audience. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the scene, a perfect backdrop to this celebration of authentic love. Later that evening, as they danced under the stars, Daniel whispered in Beatrice's ear, "You know, I once thought I needed to pretend to be someone else to find love, but you taught me that the greatest love comes from being truly ourselves." Beatrice rested her head on his shoulder, content. "And you taught me that everyone has a story worth telling, worth seeing, including my own." As the night wore on, the newly married couple looked out over the city they loved, the city whose real beauty they had helped reveal to the world. They knew that their journey was far from over. There were more stories to tell, more lives to touch, more beauty to uncover. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with open hearts and clear eyes, always striving to see and celebrate the authentic beauty in each other and in the world around them. And so, as the lights of Rio twinkled below and the stars shone above, Daniel and Beatrice began the next chapter of their story, not an ending, but a beautiful, authentic beginning.